Hello and welcome to the first LoreLines video of the Dawntrail era. There's a lot to discuss about this latest expansion. A lot. But I want to start with Alexandria and Living Memory's possible origins. So let's start with the timeline as we understand it. The Malala are stated to have left the source during the 5th Umbral era. They did not come from the 6th, as some idiot had speculated during their initial run. This is evidenced by Kryl not being 1/14th like a resident of the Shards would be, as Ishtola would have immediately recognized her ether as being weaker when she saw her. But the big question is then, where did the Malala go during the 5th Umbral Calamity? The Malala are stated to have left the source during the 5th Umbral era, which was the Calamity of Ice. There are two camps of thought on this. One, they went to an active shard, and that Alexandria and all that occurred originated on a shard we know nothing about. The other, that Alexandria is from the 12th shard, which was rejoined during the 2nd Umbral era in the Calamity of Lightning. This is where I stand, and I'm going to explain why. I should add that the LoreLines team is actually divided on this topic as well. First, from a meta standpoint, we know the shards do not correspond to the number Final Fantasy game that they share a number with. We know this as the 13th is Final Fantasy IV, and the 1st is mostly Final Fantasy V with the atmosphere of the World of Ruin from Final Fantasy VI. The Warrior of Light does appear on this shard, but going strictly by bosses, then it contains far more Final Fantasy V than Final Fantasy I. So while the 11th, 9th, 8th, and 4th shards are all still active, there's no reason to believe that Alexandria originated or exists on any of them outside the circumstance that Alexandria is from Final Fantasy IX. But as stated, that has not proven to hold true for either of the two shards we've visited thus far, and I see no reason it would be true now. But if Alexandria is from the 12th, then how did the Malala of Alo Alo Island go from the 5th Umbral era to a shard that had already been rejoined? I'd suspected time dilation could have played a part, saying that while the 12th had already been rejoined, it could have existed in its own dilated timeline which had yet to be rejoined. This gets messy and is ultimately nonsense when considering absolute time. The Ascians can't time travel, and the idea that an Ascian who is dead on the source is alive on another shard could possibly cross the rift to appear on the source suddenly alive again is laughable. My answer, however, came during the trial with Zeral Jah. In Phase 2 of the fight, what we see shocked me. In the background of the fight is the Historia Crux from Final Fantasy XIII 2. Now, this isn't some throwaway background that is randomly thrown in. The Historia Crux is a literal time travel nexus, or a crossroads of the timeline that allows players to travel between different time periods. As if this wasn't enough, the final boss of the Skydeep Cenote bears 3 marks of Ares. Ares is the constellation associated with Belial, and in the Return to Ivalice raid series, Belial used time mechanics. Since the Malala of the Source also used the key to travel the rift, at this point it became abundantly clear that they did not travel through space, but across the rift through time. They ended up on the 12th prior to its fall. So here's a quick recap of the history of Alexandria. Being from the source and already 5 times rejoined, the Malala were notably more intelligent than the denizens of the 12th. Thus did the kingdoms of the 12th seek out these wise sages to aid them as the Ascians turned the aspect of the shard towards lightning. As the storms grew worse over time, first 3 months of the year, then nearly half the year, the kingdoms of the 12th sought a way to save themselves. A seeming salvation came after lightning sparked a fire in the forest, and upon examining the charred ruins, a vein of mysterious black ore was discovered. This ore had the power to absorb lightning ether and convert it to any other kind of ether. They called it electro. Shadowmeow theorizes that this is a blend of electrum and hope, so it's possible that's where this name originated. With the Malala's improved knowledge and magical abilities, they were able to inscribe arcane circuits onto the surface of the electrope, allowing it to automatically perform any function required. A boom began, and soon electrope became a part of daily living. In time, however, sources were mined and resources grew scarcer. Nations declared war on each other for more reserves of the miracle mineral. It wasn't long until the spoils of war became its weapons, and thus the storm surge began. The war culminated in the nation of Lindblum, detonating an etheric bomb, which reduced an entire continent to nothing. The power of the explosion exceeded their scientists' wildest projections, very similar to how Black Rose reacted when infused with light ether from the first. Due to the etheric connection to the source, the Lindblom bomb drew in enough power to break the barriers between realities and rejoin the 12th to the source. However, Alexandria was not rejoined. While the barrier Alexandria erected protected them from the storm surge, it's likely that it was Preservation, the organization researching dimensional fusion, that was responsible for Alexandria not being rejoined with the rest of the 12th. We learned that while Alexandria was unaware of anything going on outside the barrier, that pieces of living memory had been lost to the rift in previous fusion attempts. While it's unlikely that any of our current shards were found, as Preservation appears to have been stumbling blind searching for the origin world of the Malala, it's not impossible that an alternate version of a shard was encountered and drained. This fusion would have required that no one was in the area as Everkeep fused, considering that there are no records of such an event happening, nor memory of anything like a sudden appearance of people within the barrier. It's hard to imagine that in such an advanced society, not even a myth or rumor exists of something like this happening before, which leads me to believe that the appearance of Alexandria on the source was the first successful rejoining Preservation executed. Sphene seems to have largely been unaware of the specifics of Preservation's efforts, only aware that there were other worlds full of aether that could be used. I like to think that perhaps they targeted worlds that were being rejoined, and thus when executing the fusion attempt, the world they were targeting was already gone. So, while not entirely a lie that we know more about the state of the shards and aetherology than Sphene, she still, in some form, is aware of the existence of other worlds. Ultimately, until we encounter one of the remaining Ascians or use the Crystal Tower on the first, we won't know for sure. But being that Alexandria comes from a world that was destroyed by lightning, and that the only instance of that on record is the 12th, it stands to reason that the 12th is where Alexandria originated. We have evidence of actual time travel when using the Dawn Key, which negates the argument that it can't be the 12th due to the timeline not matching. Now, the question of where living memory currently exists is another one entirely. We know Alexandria has attempted world fusion before, losing pieces of living memory to the rift through the process. We are not informed of a successful attempt though, and being that Alexandria's timeline spans centuries rather than millennia, it's unlikely that they encountered another shard, especially considering the extreme time dilation Alexandria experienced. If we examine the skybox though, it matches neither the source, the first, or the 13th. The closest skybox living memory matches is that of Elpis. However, it lacks any constellations, which, while visible in Elpis, are easy to lose among the magnitude of stars. For more information on the stars and why different shards possess slightly different skyboxes, please see our videos on the shards and how they each occupy a different segment of the etheric spectrum. This indicates that where living memory exists is on such a narrow etheric band that it can't see much of the visible universe, including the astrologian constellations that we've become so accustomed to seeing. Sphene states that between the storm surge and the fusion with the source, that the barrier kept them completely unaware of what was happening outside the barrier. It's possible that Sphene lied about this. She did lie to us about her motives after all, saying she did not agree with Zeralja's attack on Tuliyollal. What she meant, of course, was that she wanted to simply drain the source's ether without a fight and kill everyone rather than instigate a drawn-out campaign. She also lied about being unaware of other shards and worlds, but I digress. While fusion has been attempted, we see signs that the fusion with the source was the first successful fusion, as the land we see is the result of the storm surge, not an as-yet unknown reflection. Elsewise, the residents of Alexandria would have been less confused by the sudden appearance of an entire population within their borders, as they would have seen it before, or at least had records of such an event happening, which we receive no indication of as of yet. However, due to the absence of a planet or a life stream, the region is devoid of aether, pushing it out of etheric alignment with much of the rest of the universe, hence the strangely empty skybox and the presence of the moon and sun. We still lack a great deal of information on this, however, and I'm fairly confident that we'll get answers regarding this in 7.1, as it's somewhat important. With a few questions answered, Dawntrail has given us a flurry of new ones and made it very clear where we are heading. We know that Electrope is also possibly present on the source. If so, why did it take so long to find? If not present on the source though, where did it come from on the 12th? We're all very much looking forward to where the story is heading, and we'll be dropping more videos soon. I could not be more excited about the future of Final Fantasy XIV.